Hello again, Limbus Nation. It is Venos speaking again through the mic. Now, not too long ago, I asked a question in my community post about whether you want a Project Moon game to be released right now. And the opinion seems to be a little bit split, maybe because people appreciated this funny image that I found, but maybe also because people are extremely respectful towards PM and don't want them to rush out anything. And my question didn't really imply that. It was more about okay, a new feature complete full game will be released right now magically and it's gonna be by Project Moon. And I'd imagine that most of the player base are gonna say yes, especially if it doesn't force PM to do any unsavory practices like crunching or something. Cause yeah, who wouldn't want a new Project Moon game if it's gonna end up really good? And so I thought, okay, but what kind of game PM are gonna release as their next project? There are a lot of game genres that would fit pretty well into the setting. And fortunately, we do have some information on future game projects that may become reality. Now, do keep in mind that this information comes from unofficial statements by Project Moon and Kim Ji-hoon. As of now, there were no official announcements made. Only some concept teasers. Everything that I'm going to tell you about is subject to change and is not set in stone in any way. Alright then, let's begin. We'll first look at the concept of Lobotomy Corporation 2, which is supposed to be a simulation game where you look over and protect parts of the city from distortions. You'll be able to hire fixers that will help you deal with the problems in your area. Said fixers will have different stats that will determine their success rate in dealing with distortions. If the people that you've hired are not able to complete the task, there may be some lasting consequences for your sector, like apartment destruction, infection outbreaks, building damage, and so on. It's also your job to resolve disputes between different corporations in your area. The game is also supposed to have a 2.5D map, which will help you accurately assess the situations and prepare accordingly. It is believed that this exact game was foreshadowed in the scrapped ending to Library of Runa, where the purple tier speaks about creating a certain organization that deals with egos and distortions. Now, this game concept does sound somewhat similar to the management sim gameplay that we're used to from Lobotomy Corporation. It's just that abnormalities were replaced with distortions, and now they are actively wrecking your district. However, this sounds even more similar to the game concept of Rebel Inc., a game where you try to stabilize a region that is being invaded by insurgents. For this purpose, you enact civil policies and hire military units of your own. The game flew a bit under the radar, despite coming from the developers of Plague Inc., which is a much more well-known title. Personally, I believe that LC2 is one of the more manageable future projects that Kim Ji-hoon might realize, at least if it's anything like Rebel Inc. It would be interesting to see how PM handled their first semi-3D project. I believe that the only 3D work we've seen from them is in that one LCE teaser, but I could be wrong on that. What I'm trying to say is that this game concept is probably gonna turn up as a pretty satisfying single-player experience, while not giving too much trouble to the developers in their current state. It is possible that they're developing something similar on the side, but who knows. Another game that was teased way back then was project named LC-B, which we now know as Limbus Company. The concept that was described shares a lot of similarities with the current gacha, but there was never a mention of any live service features. Instead, there'd be a hiring system where you could get units for your mobile fixer office. The main gameplay loop pretty much described mirror dungeons of today. You'd have a top-down exploration mode where you'd explore the Lobotomy Corporation dungeons, and a combat mode, but with a first-person dungeon RPG view. Something that is very similar to those old dungeon crawlers. I honestly do not know how they planned for this type of gameplay to work, especially considering the gameplay features Limbus has today, but it still would be fun to get a first-person game for Project Moon. It would also be great for Kim Ji-hoon to finish writing Distortion Detective, but that's only going to happen when they translate the novel story into a video game. What video game exactly? Well, there were rumors that it was going to be a visual novel game. Maybe this statement is backed up by the director himself, but I could not find any evidence for some reason, even though I remember hearing this a lot back in the day. Still, the visual novel idea is even more under question, because Kim Ji-hoon wants to fit some Distortion Detective elements into his new upcoming 3D third-person RPG action game. Well, not upcoming, but at least he mentioned the concept. All we know about this potential project is that it will have different main characters that will change the genre slightly. For example, if you were to play Gabora, it would be a pure action game, but if you were to play Moses, it would have some detective elements. The game is going to consist of preset locations and is definitely not going to be an open world. And the game is potentially going to be a live service. Damn. This project seems like one of those spur-of-the-moment ideas. Like maybe Kim Ji-hoon had a dream similar to the concept, woke up and said, yeah, I want to make this into a game. He even says that his plans may come to fruition if he has like 100 employees or so. And you know, this one seems a little bit too ambitious for the current Project Moon, but if this is something the director has full faith in, then sure, go for it, my guy. I think every fan is going to be happy to get a game that is kind of similar to Nier Automata. Just, you know, minus the open world. And that's pretty much everything about future potential projects that Project Moon had mentioned at some point. I want to throw out a quick mention about the Project Moon theme park that was mentioned in the same stream as the 3D game. Like, our director is going to be unironically Mickey Mouse with his own Kim Ji-hoon land. It was not enough to compete with Subway, now you're squaring off against Disney? You know what? Sure. I would love to ride on the Red Mist Express. But yeah, no, the actual useful info part of the video is over. You can go now. However, this wouldn't be a Veno yapping video if I didn't give some of my opinions. I'm now gonna talk about some game concepts that I think would be cool if they were in a Project Moon setting. I'll try to pick genres that will at least loosely fit, but most of them are just my wishful thinking. A dog can dream after all. So my first pick for a game that I'd personally like to see is a fighting game. Now, don't get me wrong, but I do not believe that Project Moon will be able to properly handle something like this. The fighting genre requires a lot of meticulous balancing and well thought out game mechanics to become an enjoyable experience. Instead, the title should be co-developed with a studio that has a couple of titles in the genre under their belt. Arc System Works immediately come to mind, but other developers can be a huge help as well. The main reason why I mention ArcSys specifically is because they have substantial expertise in adapting characters from media into a fighting game environment. Most notable examples being Lucy from Cyberpunk Edgerunners, who made it into Guilty Gear Strive, and Ruby, who were featured in BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle. Well, honestly, the entirety of BB Tag is a crossover game, so yeah. I wouldn't even mind Project Moon characters being guest fighters in similar titles. Maybe a game like Dengeki Bunko could be possible, but with characters from gachas instead of light novels. That would probably mean no Gebra as a fighter, but hey, I'll take anything at this point. However, in case we do get a fighting game all to ourselves, I'd imagine we'd get some unique mechanics to differentiate our game from others. I guess if it were up to me, I'd have every character have their own install super move. Kind of like a super form, I guess. That would symbolize the manifestation of a character's ego or distortion. It would be separate from the super meter and activate on conditions that are different for everyone. Maybe it can be a separate meter, I don't know. I just imagine it being similar to overdrives in BlazBlue. Yes, I am a fan of this series, how could you tell? There are a lot of PM characters that would be extremely interesting to see realized in such a game. Imagine how interesting someone like Roland could be. Another idea that this sick brain of mine had come up with is a dating sim. And okay, hear me out on this. On Project Moon's old YouTube channel called Moon Project, there are two videos referencing the idea of a dating sim. Specifically, a dating sim called Lobotomy High, where you date abnormalities when they're suddenly feeling cute. Obviously, this is an April Fool's joke, but what if it wasn't? What if Kim Ji-hoon is actually considering... Nah, no way. Unless... Moses dating sim? Okay, I'll stop. Alright, board members. My next pitch. Horror game. Preferably first person. Remember how the LCB project was planned as a dungeon crawler? Repurposing this idea into a horror featuring abnormalities or even creatures from the outskirts would be really cool. We could even sprinkle in some so-called friend slop gameplay into it. You know, make it co-op, why not? You play as Nuggets in a collapsed branch of LobCorp, where you'll need to make it out of there, scavenging equipment and ego to drive back the abnormalities that are haunting you. could be cool. Or make it single player for more immersion. Though I'm not sure if people who are familiar with the Abnos will be scared of something whose mechanics and behavior they've known for several years. Making new Abnos is an answer to that, I suppose. Just have to be careful not to turn this into a mascot horror situation, like this. Something much more ambitious would be making a first-person RPG with an open world. And I know that Kim Ji-hoon is not a fan of open worlds, but honestly, say to me with a straight face that a Cyberpunk 2077 inspired RPG that takes place in the city and has a more in-depth focus on fast, fluid and flashy melee combat is not a dream made true for the majority of the fanbase. People already made several attempts at realizing a similar concept, one of them even developing a major hit that is played by thousands, despite the project's numerous flaws and lack of polish. At least that's what I've heard. I don't play Roblox. The obvious flaw with this idea is that making such a game is a tremendous endeavor for the company, almost impossible even, and it's definitely not going to be bug-free. Maybe this will happen when PM becomes a huge company with thousands of employees making the same game year after year, while a dog sits on a mountain made of trillions of Korean won in his office. Or maybe they'll contract another company for that, I don't know. A tiny bit far-fetched for an idea, but still, a dog can dream. The last concept I thought of, and the most self-indulging, for me I guess, is an MMO. And not one of those World of Warcraft clones, no. Something a bit more social. Despite Limbus being an online game, it doesn't really embody the online aspect of it very well. The only way of interacting with other players in-game is adding their company to use as support. So, why not have a social space where PM fans can interact and have a good time? This would be a good excuse to utilize those chibi sinners that sometimes appear in-game. Maybe it can be a 2D side-scroller, kind of like MapleStory. Or, optionally, we could get a genuine MMORPG with everything that it entails. The problem is that to support such a project, you'd need considerable manpower, much more than what is required by a gacha game. So the concept should be a relatively small scale and not really serious, for the sake of Project Moon and their sanity. And we also should not forget that MMOs, well, they're kind of a closed-off genre that has its own target audience. What I'm saying is, not everyone is gonna jump at the idea right away. Capitalizing on the audience that actually likes this genre is the only way this game will make any money. This means that the game needs to compete with other projects, innovate on the formula, introduce microtransactions, expansions, story additions, lore corrections, customization, level progression... Oh, sorry, I got dizzy there for a second. Making any new project from scratch would probably induce a similar headache to anyone who's already managing a company that's struggling to upkeep its current live service game. There's no need to push Kim Ji-hoon into making something like the stuff I've mentioned. He's already plenty motivated by himself and his ideas. Whatever the director comes up with, we'll be more than happy to try it out. But even still, fantasizing about what can be, that never hurt anyone, I don't think. So let me know in the comments what kind of games you'd be happy to see from Project Moon in the future. Also, do all the other YouTube stuff. I've heard there's a weird hype feature now, so if you really want to support me, then there's another button to press, besides subscribing, liking, pressing the bell, sharing. I think that's like 5 buttons? Well, I'm too lazy to even press one. Oh, and if you're wondering why there was no meme segment at the start, this is why. Anyway, bye-bye! I'm not trying to ruin your fun, but change the teams without please. It's Ricardo over against, cause I can't rely on Sinclair, he's level 3. Gets why Ishmael's identity, take it from me. If you see me in a Limbus, say hi, but if you see me in MD, I'm a talkative guy. Maybe we'll convert some modules and remember the time. And even though I win raid, I'm a Project Moon fan. Yeah, a lot of players all tap from the game and write about how Limbus had become lame, forgetting their last days at the facility and all the books they've burned at the library. Next day I walked to H-Corp, waiting for brats at the door. Bought me more Tiger Mark rounds, but all around me are clowns. Finally found me some prey, and the nerves hit like a train. 5 men are bringing the pain. My death was pretty late. I wanna bring up a toast. Welcome my sisters and bros, but some disrespectful prick stole all my precious coupons. My lusciousness is now gone. I'll break your every bone, chase you to MD extreme. Don't click away your bristly limbus. Say hi, but if you see me in MD, I'm a talkative guy. Maybe we'll convert some modules and remember the time. And even though I win raid, I'm a Project Moon fan. Yeah, a lot of players all tap from the game and write about how members have become lame, forgetting their last days at the facility and all the books they've burned at the library.